I feel really honoured to be here today to listen to whatever comes out of our conversations. And the reason for today is structure, is to have a kind of meaningful conversation about the whole process of what we've been through in the poetry project. And I didn't make up this process. This process was devised by Michael White and David Epstein, two narrative therapists from Australia and New Zealand that worked a lot with Maori and Indigenous populations and realised the importance of witnessing each other's stories. So what we're doing here today is witnessing and hearing the stories about this project and the values behind it that have driven it. So I have at least one, hopefully two people that have volunteered for me to interview you in a bit more depth and in a semi-structured way. I've got about 10 questions, which is probably a bit too much, and it'll be about 15-20 minutes each.
Yeah.
And I may have to stop you at some point, so I do apologise, just in case, so that to give time or to move us on to the next question, because I know both of you have a lot of meaningful stuff to say. What, in terms of the importance of it, it's about witnessing it. Now you could just sit there and listen to it, and that would be great, but actually what I want is for two or three of you to sit here and listen in a very particular way. So that I want, and the questions are there, is what strikes you as you listen to Freddi and James? Are there any images that come to mind that it evokes for you? And any images, and how does that resonate with you? How does that relate to your own experience? And what does that maybe encourage you to want to do as a consequence of listening? And then, when I've interviewed Freddi and James, I'll turn to you both, and Jodie will film us, and I'll ask you those questions, and they'll be filmed, and you two will listen. Now, part of it is, it's really difficult. It's as if we're in a pub together with nobody looking, so don't make eye contact. It's just the three of us having a conversation. And then likewise, when I interview you, it's just going to be us having a conversation. But it's really hard not to make eye contact with the person you're talking about. And then I turn back to you both and say, what struck you about hearing those reflections? And I describe it as a bit like flaky pastry, because what it does is it thickens the story that we're telling. I would like to invite the witnesses. I think it'd be helpful if they sat here. I'm Polly. Welcome Freddi and welcome James. I'm really
nice to be here.
Glad to see. I guess to kick us off, I'm curious to know a little bit more about your experiences of taking part in this project, and in particular, what brought you to be part of this project? What sort of motivation was there for you to join? Either of you, we'll have it as a conversation as much.
Okay, well, I would like to say that I've been writing poetry all my life.
Wow.
Since I was at school,
right,
when we had those little cubicles where you were supposed to do study, and I used to write poetry and read Tolkien instead of what I was supposed to be doing, because it's a way of saying stuff that you can't say to anybody else ever. So it would just go on paper and hidden away. Because when I was a child, I could never say anything about who I really was. And it's only quite recently that I realised how locked down I was.
So what kind of values would you say drove or motivate you to write poetry?
I need to speak. I need to have my voice heard.
And where does that come from, that need or that?
I think that's part of me, just me, Freddi, the me I am.
Okay, thank you. What about you, James?
Well, I've always liked English, and I like Shakespeare, and I'm thrilled when I understand a bit of it. You know? You've got to just always go to the glossary and work out what this might have meant and all that stuff. And when I first came out after my wife died, I went to a poetry group and wrote a couple of poems, and at the time it just seemed a completely new way for me to use some of the words and some of the language that I'd heard, however poorly, but still managed to do something. And when this project came about and we were met with Jay and all the rest of it, I just thought this was wonderful, because he made us sit down and write what we were feeling.
Yeah.
And it was pressure. I thought it was pressure.
Precious.
And it was good, precious and pressured.
Yeah.
In other words, you can do it. You can do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was quite an empowering situation.
Wow.
And when I came to write what I had written, I thought, wow, that's funny, isn't it? Because I quite liked it.
And what do you think? So that those are really powerful stories. What there's something about communication I'm hearing with both of you. Where do you think that value of wanting to communicate comes from?
There's a passion in both of us, I think. There's a passion
Comes from your heart.
about change and vitality,
Change and vitality.
and causing things to happen, and activism, all that sort of
And
stuff.
where do you think that those values come from or stem from?
Well, I don't know. I wrote to Nelson Mandela for 27 years
Wow.
until he came out of prison.
Wow.
And that was just a sort of an appreciation of him and the desire for change in South Africa and racism to be got rid of and all the rest of it.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is where does that value of wanting to make a difference, wanting change, wanting good things to happen in the world, where do you think the roots of that are for each of you?
For me, I'm an old soul. I've been here a long time, and I've always been fighting for justice and fairness for people.
Who else would recognise that you have those values and beliefs?
Everybody who knows me now.
Yes, I think my kids know, and they've supported me in all sorts of ways, and I think everybody that I came across knew that I thought things should change.
Right, okay.
I want to add something, because I thought about it when James was speaking earlier.
Yeah.
As a teacher,
Yeah.
I know that some people are scared of poetry,
Yeah.
but to me, words are just magic,
Magic.
and they just pop out of me all the time. I've been through a year of just waking up at 4 a.m. thinking, oh, that's a poem, and just writing it down.
That's brilliant, brilliant. So that kind of leads me to ask you, what would be the most important thing for you to talk about in relation to this poetry project? I'm just wondering what might have... Yeah.
The important thing for me at the moment to say is that there are many people suffering from various mental health situations. It's got a lot worse. It's not going away, and it's in young people as well as older people. As older people, we are being ignored and told, oh, it's just part of getting old. And I'm fighting that tooth and nail, because it is not part of getting old. And it's getting mixed up with dementia, which is something else. And I want people to know that this kind of expressing yourself, whether it's on a piece of paper or verbally, is part of understanding where your mental health wellness comes from.
So it's part of fighting the stigma and the ageism.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything else? What would be important for you to talk about, James?
I think I missed referencing the fact that I was brought up in a Baptist church,
Right.
and from the age of 9 onwards, I had the Gospels in front of me, and I thought there was something very different between what the Gospels were saying and what the church was doing. And I thought, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is crazy. Why the hell don't they just pay attention to the need to love each other? And that sort of had a thing with me all through my life, that if I saw injustice, I wanted to change it.
Right. So
Then
those.
my son went into overseas development, every country in Africa that he worked in, I would visit, and I would see the terrible situations of so many people, and thinking, what a corrupt system we've got. This is just dreadful.
So those values that you got from your Baptist gospel readings influenced your own values about justice,
I
and
think
obviously
it did.
influenced your son's choices in life
Yes,
as
I
well.
think it did, yes.
So that legacy continues.
Yes, I think so.
Wow. So that's interesting, because I was going to say what events in your life have helped you engage with that work, and in a sense you've just kind of answered that question.
Well, it's the church. I mean, I went with Christian Aid to South Africa in 1994 when they were having their first elections, and I went around various churches teaching people what democracy was all about, because they had no idea. They had no idea what democracy was, and you had to teach them how to vote and the consequences and all the rest of it.
Wow.
And I also went to Palestine.
Wow.
And I saw the terrible situation of Palestinians and how they'd been oppressed for so long. I thought it was wrong. I've got Jewish friends who thought the same. And this has to change, and now look where we are.
Yeah, and that was
It's a terrible situation which has been building for 75 years.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is your deep commitment to social justice that goes way back, and your commitment to change and your passion for change, and that this poetry project was another action against ageism and stigma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good summary.
Anyone think I was It's wonderful. And what about you, Freddi? What other things are important for you to talk about, or events that have helped shape you to help engage with this work?
I go back to when I was a child, and my father was my earliest teacher in this life. He was amazing, and he was for social change.
Right.
And he there were things that he didn't do that were correct, but for me, he taught me about that religion isn't it, and that you are your own spirit, and your conscience tells you whether you've done something right or wrong. And I lost him when I was 18, and it's taken me most of my life to understand what he was talking about in the first place. He believed in reincarnation, and he should have been born a Hindu. There you go. And my story at the moment is about coming through a Jewish childhood of repression and dysfunctionality, and finding myself through that. And I really only have just come to that in many ways. I've 23 years on an antidepressant by this mad NHS that just throws drugs at mental health situations and mislabel people.
So again, what I'm hearing as we're having this conversation, it's sometimes hard to leap straight into the story, isn't it? But as it's unfolding, I'm hearing that those roots of social justice go way back, and for you are influenced by your father and his approach to religion, and that idea of conscience and your own conscience, which I think is very much there for both of what you're saying. And so that the value of being part of this poetry project isn't just, let's be part of the poetry project. It sounds as if it's deeper than that.
Oh, much deeper.
Much deeper.
Okay, can you tell me a bit more about why it's a bit deeper than just that?
For me, it's deeper because it's part of what maintaining good mental health is all about. It's the people that are around me in these various meetings we've had, and the people like Jay that came to do the poetry with us, that sort of inspire you to get on and do things and enjoy what you're able to do. I mean, okay, so as you get older, things go off a bit, obviously. You can't do the hill walking and the climbing you used to and all the other wonderful things. But there are things you can still do for a long time, and rather do them than not.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, James.
And people love a good quote. I love a good quote. I love words.
Yeah.
And people who are now dead said what they said then, and you can read their words and still think about what they thought years ago about how people should live a good life. And there's always unfairness around you. At the moment it seems particularly awful, but it has been awful for millennia, and things change. But nothing changes unless people don't say, this isn't right, this should change. So people have to speak up and say. You can't just sit back and go, oh dear, this is awful, isn't it? Or should we just sort of, well, at the moment it seems like put your feet up and watch telly.
So for you it's the speak up for change, and also the things.
I hate the expression, I can't be bothered.
Oh yeah.
That gets on my nerves, and sometimes I find myself saying it when I look at the washing up. I can't be bothered, and then I think, oh yes I can.
Be bothered. Brilliant.
Here, James.
So you're both bothered, and you're both bothered
You're
about
both very
words
bothered,
and the values of social justice and change.
Yeah.
I want my words to last long after I've gone.
I was thinking, you reminded me of a George Eliot quote, which I'll get wrong, something about you only die when the memory of you the words and memories of you die. So something, I'm twisting that because I'm
Okay.
But I'm just wondering, thinking about the actual workshops, and particularly Jay's excellent facilitation of them and passion that he brings, and to the other people who've been part of them and the stories that we've heard from each other. I'm wondering, are there any particular stories or moments that stand out or captured your attention that you can remember?
I want to say that Jay's passion, his own personal passion, fires me. And last year he invited me to get up on a stage and I don't speak my poetry because I can't remember it all, but I read it, and whoa, that was a big plus for me, because I'm an actress and a performer and have been all my life, and I relish that. But I went to college and did drama and art, and chose sort of the art where the drama came out in the teaching. So every day in my classroom I was an actress performing to my audience of children. When I got up on that stage at the Stretford Public Hall and read the first poem I'd ever read aloud to an audience, quite a big audience, I thought, oh, I like this. And now I do every month go to the Central Library in Manchester and perform a couple of poems.
Wow, brilliant.
I love it.
But thinking about our workshops, though, the ones that...
that
was
introduced me. I'd never met Jay before then.
Oh, right.
So I'd been writing.
Right, but you hadn't performed.
But I'd never shared.
Was that before or after these workshops that we've just done? Can you remember? During.
I think.
So part of the impact then of these workshops that we've been doing was to
It took a step up for me.
Finding your voice literally and speaking it out loud publicly. Wow. What about yourself, James? Any standout moments for the workshop that we
I don't know.
It was quite a while ago.
It was that first workshop which did it for me.
Yeah.
I was so impressed. The fact that I was getting poems sent to me by Jay, whether I wanted them or not. and I enjoyed reading them, and I thought, wow, I just admire the ability so much. and you know, I don't have much ability, but when I do something, I like doing it. And I first performed Hamlet's soliloquy at school, and I can still remember the words now. They meant so much to me. And the 7 Ages of Men. There are so many wonderful pictures that he painted.
Didn't he just?
And I just admire it so much. And if it could just be reinterpreted for kids and written as poetry and taught with some enthusiasm, perhaps it would make a big difference to people.
Brilliant. What about the other people in the workshops? Because one of the things that struck me was listening to each other's stories.
That was another
and
big
I found
thing,
that amazingly moving and powerful. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that struck you about hearing other people's stories without...
I was just so impressed. I don't know about you, but I was so impressed.
When people have the courage to share something that was perhaps painful, it is so moving. It's amazing.
And you know that men don't talk about their emotions very much. I think that's a terrible handicap. You have to talk about your emotions, but poetry helps you form those emotions and bring them to light when you have to or want to.
Do you think then that poetry could be used more helpfully to encourage men to
I do
write
think that's true, but how you get men to gather and do that is another matter, because they're hopeless.
We might have to.
Well, that's where I work, in the community, and I put a lot of time and effort into getting people to come to the community.
You're a gatherer,
projects.
aren't you? And what about for you, Freddi? Any particular moments when listening? Because you came to a couple of the workshops, so you heard a number of other people's stories.
Everybody's voice is so personal and just beautiful. I can remember particular moments when somebody said their poem and I thought, oh yes, you know, and it feeds your heart.
It feeds your heart. Indeed it does.
Yes, it does. And your spirit. It feeds the whole person.
So it's not. So what I'm hearing is, it wasn't just the power of you having this, hearing Jay's passion, having that permission to write and writing and speaking your own poem, but also how that other people's poems resonated.
Yes,
it's inspiring.
It is. It is.
Thank you for that. Well, I'm just going to ask if there were any particular challenges in being part of this project, because we can all go, oh, isn't it lovely? But actually, you know, I'm just wondering about challenges as well.
Well, I found the challenge encouraged me to do more, to get out more, not to sit and watch television too much, to engage with people. I do that through the LGBT Foundation as well, and you've just got to keep going until you drop. I think you can make old age quite bad if you let it. And if you can't be bothered to do things, you won't do them. And you need somebody to do it with often, and I've found the group a wonderful asset in helping to do
things. So the poetry, the group and the LGBT all help in
all of them. They're my mental health support system. All these things are my support system.
Brilliant, thank you, James.
And all the people, because the other people count.
Like Sophie and Liz and Jay.
Yes, people who do this and encourage us and hold these meetings and provide the facilities. It's wonderful.
Brilliant.
And I would echo that, but say it in a slightly different way. That I felt I had come home in lots of ways, because I haven't watched telly for a year, over a year. It's that little devil in the corner that I just do not engage with, because it's so addictive and full of absolute garbage.
Well, what about the challenges in coming and just the transport or getting here or the pragmatics of it as well, Freddi? I'm just thinking.
Well, thank God they provide taxi costs, because otherwise I don't go into town anymore at all. I'm a disabled driver. The traffic is horrendous, so I have to get taxis, and buses and trams don't go where I live. So.
Right. So who else might know about these particular challenges? Mobility and driving and access.
Well, I shout about it.
And you've mentioned that you get help in overcoming those challenges.
Yeah, I still get around okay, so I don't have to worry about that.
Perhaps I should have asked this question a minute ago, but did hearing other people's stories impact on you in any way in the workshops?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Because if people, as I said before, if people have the courage to share with you what was their deepest hurt, maybe, then when you hear that, how can you not be moved by the courage of that person's sharing? And for me, understanding through my own mental health becoming well again last year, and through ongoing therapy, I need to share that with people in a way to make it real. I know it's real, but
So
I don't know, I'm about sharing.
So the act of witnessing and being witnessed
Yes, being
within the
witnessed.
workshops was powerful as well.
Yes, and hearing other people's stories.
Yeah. What struck you, James?
Excuse me. It's hearing other people's stories and how they've overcome them, and the difficulties they face, and the ways around the difficulties.
Yeah, it's the overcoming.
Solving the problems and
Yeah.
getting on with it, really.
Yeah. The overcoming of it.
Yeah, I've been
Struck me.
impressed with people's spirits and
Yeah.
people's resilience.
Yeah.
We had a lot of resilience in the old days. I don't know about today, but we were sort of dragged up with resilience. And thank you. Yeah, we were dragged up with resilience, and that's what all my training in the Boys Brigade and the various activities I did. It trained you to just keep going, and you get there in the end.
I'll be asking you later what you want to share with others, but about that kind of stuff and advice you'd give. But in the meantime, we've been asked, so why creative approaches? Why poetry to help with mental health issues? We get challenged by conditioners and others. What would your answer be to those people?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, doctors call it medicine, I call it drugs, and it's not. Have you got that? It's not the answer to mental health issues. It's a mask, a sedation, and it makes me very, very, very upset. I'm supporting somebody at the moment who's 80, and she's firmly of the belief that the doctor gave her this medicine, which she wants to call it medicine, and it will make her better. And I know it won't.
So what would you say to them about creative projects and poetry, and what would you say why would you say this is important?
Because everybody has the facility to be creative. We are human beings, it's part of the human spirit. Sometimes it's knocked out of you at a very early age. I've been a teacher for many, many years. I know how the educational system stopped me being as creative a teacher as I would have liked to have been, and I fought it for a long time, and then lost my job because of it. They found a way to just get rid of me.
So is there anything today you'd like to say about creative projects for older people?
I think they're essential. I think it's the thing that gets your brain ticking over again.
It's the thing
If
that
it's
gets your
getting a
brain
bit lazy sometimes, and you stop thinking new things,
Right.
there's always something new. You learn something every day.
So it gets your brain ticking,
Yes,
you're learning something,
yes.
you're meeting. But maybe we need to think about some intergenerational work to help younger people be
I would
good
love
as
to.
Yes,
well.
yes. Now we've done that at the LGBT Foundation. Pride in Aging,
Yeah.
I belong to that group, and we've done this intergenerational stuff
Yeah.
with the Proud Trust,
Right.
which is for youngsters, 16 to 25, something
Yeah.
like that. And it was the most wonderful event.
Yeah.
They were performing on stage, we were doing our bit, and we danced and we sang, and we had a wonderful sort of 60s reflection moment. Wow, it was lovely. We had a super time.
So the impact of creativity, on mental health, what would you say?
It's just the best.
Self-esteem and
Self-esteem.
confidence comes
Yes,
through the
yes.
arts,
Self-
not learning to
Yes.
read and write.
Yes, indeed.
And that squashed it all, and now children are encouraged only to learn for the test, and if they don't pass the test, they're considered a failure, and that's just kills children's self-esteem at 7.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As we look to the future, I'm just wondering, is there any kind of legacy that you can share, that you'd like to share with others? You know, what would be important for others to know, or advice you'd give others?
Well, I would go back into schools and talk to children about what they think old age is all about, and what are you going to do in your third age, which is coming, whether you like it or not.
Okay. And what?
I appreciate what Manchester has in its arts sector. We have the most fabulous arts complexes with Home, the Lowry, the Royal Exchange, and the various theatres, the Contact
And they need
Theatre.
to keep funding it, don't they?
They need to be funded, they need to be kept going. Otherwise we're going to totally lose the whole idea of creativity. And we're good at it in this country.
And in Manchester.
And in Manchester especially.
But what about the project? I'm thinking about the project legacy. What would, if someone else wanted to do this project, say in Leicester or Cornwall, what advice would you want to give them?
Well, there's an immediate legacy for me because I'm preparing my end of life stuff.
Okay.
Because we did this project of creating a box of me being things which the person executing your will could go through, and they've got an immediate picture for the funeral. You know, I anticipate having a ball at my funeral, but of course I won't be there. And it's a terrible thing. I'm preparing all these wonderful things.
We should do
And a bit of poetry is in there.
Right. Your
Do
poem.
it before you.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, can I just check the poem that you wrote here?
Yes, I'm going to put it in there, yes.
Wow.
And I'm going to try and include it in my funeral.
Oh my word, what a legacy that is.
Well, it could be a legacy.
Blimey.
They may say, what a load of crap. But that's another matter. I might just sneak one of Jay's in instead.
And what about advice, though, to anyone else wanting to do this sort of work?
Read my book.
Read your book.
Oh, I
Oh, when it comes out.
I would just say get on with it and explore. Explore your mind and explore the world and explore other people's dreams.
Explore other people's
build
dreams.
your own.
That's a great quote, isn't it? Explore
I love
other
it.
people's dreams.
I love it.
And open your eyes.
And I guess I'm thinking, what are your hopes for how this will be used? The poetry, the book that we're pulling
Read the
together.
book. Read the book.
The
I
film.
just wish it had come 10 years ago. I'm 84 and I don't expect to have that long to go, but I was saying that when I was 70.
Yeah.
I was doing a counselling course
Right.
and they wanted me to go on. And I said, well, nobody wants to talk to a counsellor at 71 when I'll be finished. Bloody, I mean, goodness me, here we are.
Yeah.
Still here, and I wish this had all come earlier.
But given that It's now.
Yes.
What hope do you have for how it can help other people, or how it can be used?
That's another. I haven't thought much about that.
It's all right.
But it's a question of the facilities being there and the communication with older people.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that.
Communication with older people.
Yeah.
Going back to the outreach work that you were talking about,
Yeah.
Freddi.
It's
I've
difficult.
got a bit of a plan.
You've got a cunning plan.
Well, I'm 72
Yeah.
and I've got 18 years. When I'm 90, I'm going to stop all this outreach stuff and I'm going to sit back and read all the books that I've been buying that I haven't had time to read. You know,
Okay.
that's
We're all
my.
piling
So
up
I've got
the
then 10 years to sit back and enjoy all my books.
So in 5 to 10 years' time, God willing, from now, what would you like others to hear about this? And what do you consider makes this so important?
I would like to see English education go back to what it was.
Education.
Yeah, for children to realise that they are creative and that they have self-esteem and confidence, and it doesn't come through passing arbitrary tests. I'm still a teacher. I'll always be a teacher. I still do tutor.
And what about for this project, though?
For this project,
in
read
5
our
or 10
book.
years?
I would like to see another book and another book,
Okay.
and more
So
you'd
people
like more
come
books?
to
Another
sit
group of
Okay.
older people meeting,
Yeah.
and more poems being thrown into the atmosphere and just sung.
Absolutely. So more poems, more poetry,
Yes,
more books.
yes, and
More
more plays and more arts, and
Okay. Brilliant.
that's the stuff.
And is there anything else that you want to mention that you haven't had a chance to say before I turn to the witnesses?
I don't know, I have such a zest for life.
Yeah.
Yes, I still
I
enjoy
feel
my life.
incredibly vital.
Yeah.
I'm not stopping. And I live surrounded by older people, my peer group, because we are lumped in these buildings called retirement properties where you have to be over 55, so you can be 80, 90 and still be living there. And I see such a malaise amongst the old of this country at the moment, and I really want to wake them up.
Wake people up.
I meet with a group of older people at my church, and some of them are in their 90s. One is 97, and she does the Guardian crossword every day. And if she's struggling on one particular clue, she'll ring her daughter in America, and they'll discuss it, and they will do it. And she has a mind like a tack, as sharp as anything, and really good. And all of them, 1 or 2 arrive on the old Zimmer frames.
I thought you were going to say mopeds then.
Zimmer frames, and we have a lunch together once a month, and we put the world right. I don't know what's wrong with the world, but we put it right in about 2 hours.
Brilliant.
Honestly, if they just listened to us, it'd be wonderful.
Why do they not listen to you? So what I'm also hearing is about vitality.
Yes,
And keeping
yes,
vitality alive,
yes.
and that creativity is part of that wellspring of vitality, which you want other older people to share in.
Yeah, vitality gets more difficult as you get older.
Oh yeah.
Things start falling
It's a
apart.
challenge.
You
And
know?
you have to take responsibility for yourself. You
Yes.
can't think, oh, somebody
else.
else is going to look after me. You have to look after your own
Yeah.
health and welfare.
I've had type 1 diabetes for 59 years.
Wow.
I was a juvenile onset type 1. And you've got to get used to a whole regime,
Wow.
which is following your blood sugar levels. You know, it's a relentless business, taking responsibility for your health.
But the world is full of dangers, you know, the food that we eat, the atmosphere.
Well, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
I know.
But about the poetry project, is
Yeah.
there anything else you want to just say? I just think I want to thank you both for your passion and and contribution?
I've said enough. What about you? No,
No.
Can I just ask you both, who else knows about the importance of this particular poetry project for you both? Who else
Well,
knows?
I've told a few friends,
Yeah.
yes.
Everybody that I know knows
Yes.
that I do it because
Yes.
I don't shut up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have another colourful array of people who have been part of this creative project. Thank you, Val, Deanne and Kate, for being part of this part of the conversation. And thank you for your careful listening to what we've just been listening to. I'm just wondering what you can say, if anything, about what captured your attention as you were listening to James and Freddi.
For me, everything captured my attention. You know, what we have in common, a lot, you know, we all have a lot of similar experiences, life experiences. And
Can you say a bit more? In
well,
what way?
we have a need to express ourselves in poetry form because it's very therapeutic.
Therapeutic.
You know, because a lot of us, we're not brave enough to speak out.
Right.
And again, there's all sorts of things going on in our heads often. And, you know, the best way to get it out is, well, I advise people to journal.
Journal.
And I journal in poetic form, what I call my therapeutic poetic processing.
Okay.
And I think that is so important.
Yeah.
Getting it out of our heads on paper, sharing it with other people, because then it resonates with them.
So do you see that as helping your own mental health and other people's mental
Yes.
health to write it, to
Yes.
speak it?
Yeah.
The thing that struck me was this necessity to voice.
The necessity to voice.
You know, the moments either through sort of the educational system, which taught one particular type of being able to communicate, and then discovering either through the education system. I mean, James talked about Shakespeare. You know, sort of coming back in later years to be able to reflect on those things. And there was an interesting comment about intergenerational communication, and I think that is incredibly important, because the one thing that kept coming through to me, the thing that was rattling back in my brain was thinking, do you know, if we were having this conversation within a different culture, we wouldn't be talking about age and well-being. We would be talking about the well-being of the elders.
Yes. Yes.
And there is a different shift. We're not invisible. And I think this need and necessity to be voiced and to allow voice to not be invisible and to allow the self-esteem to be there, but also to allow the people who've lived longer and who've experienced so much more than the people coming up. It's a different experience, but it is important, I think, that for well-being, maybe on both sides of the scale, for the youth to say, you know, it's okay, don't be frightened. If you fail your SATs, oh gosh, you know, it's just a number. It's not the end, literally not the end of the world. It's not the end of your well-being. There are other opportunities. You take a slightly different route, you know, God knows I did. And, you know, it's one of those things.
What routes do you take, Kate?
Well, I floundered at my A-levels as they were then.
I thought you meant about mental health.
And it hit me.
Yeah.
It really hit me. My self-esteem just went to the floor during my teens. And then somebody just, my mum, bless her, saying, "You're good at drawing, go to art college," you know. and the more technical route or the more academic route became far more practical, and my creativity just flourished, you know. I
So
did not been for that
creative-
conversation from an older parent to a younger teenager, you know, sort of on that. It was important.
So your creativity has been there from your early days and has flourished and is part of your well-being.
Yes, very much so. Very, very much so.
Thank you. What struck you, Val?
I was thinking though, I was sort of made to feel really worthless when I started primary school, because I've just bullied all the time, and used to get gangs come up and hit me on the way home, and in the playground. Actually, one girl was removed from the school because a lot of parents was complaining she bullied lots of the young ones. But
So was some of what Freddi was saying about school, did that resonate?
yes,
with
that
you?
resonates a lot. Yeah,
What else struck you about what James and Freddi said?
that it does. Yeah, it helps our emotions. And one time when I had this injury and coming off a sledge, and it damaged something to do with the shoulder and neck, and I spent some time in bed trying to recover from that. And my mother was there looking after me, and she later had cancer, and then I had to look after her. But so during that time, people thought that a lot of it was to do with mental illness. I know they did. And I used to wake up at 2 in the morning and write poetry then.
Right.
Actually, I find I'm able to help others because our craft group in where we live, they asked me to go and recite poetry every week.
Well, you are a poet. You've written so much and published, and you've been such a core member of the Poetry Project for us, Val. I'm not surprised they've asked you to do that. So, yeah. Did any images strike you as you were listening to James and Freddi? Did any sort of pictures come into your mind?
Well, Freddi was talking about sharing our deepest hurt, which we can do, and we need to share it, which will help others.
So sharing is important.
Sharing helps a lot in the groups.
So that resonated.
Yes, absolutely. Also, I have a granddaughter who has suffered a lot from mental health problems, and she was actually sectioned a few years ago. And we just don't see her much, unfortunately, but we get to hear how she is because her sister goes and visits her a lot.
Right.
But I hear that she keeps me cards, and she keeps them in a place where she can see them.
Good.
And I know that she appreciates me that way.
I'm
so,
sure she
yeah.
does. Well, I'm sure a lot of people appreciate you and your words. I'm just go to the Deanne and Kate and say what images, did anything else strike you, or did any images come to
A
mind?
lot came up for me. My childhood experiences when I first came here. I was born in Jamaica, and I came here when I was 9 years old, and I suffered horrendous racism at school. And I can't remember who it was that said, we were fighting. It might have been Valerie that said it. Being beaten, you'd be kicked, punched, and I'd get into trouble. Until one of the lovely teachers realised what was happening, and he took me under his wing. And he, I think, told all the other teachers, because then they started looking after me and defending me. So it brought that up for me, but quite a few things. The miseducation of the current education system, it's not really teaching children as such. Because I taught my 2 daughters myself at home, because I realised there was so much that was missing. For instance, I say history hasn't got any colour. But we have black history, so I used to go into schools and colleges and do black history presentations, because I think these are things we all need to know. But it brought up church. I was in church for many years, and then after a while I was thinking, so okay, why are you teaching this but you're not doing it? So I left the church, and then when I researched religion and I see how it was used, to control the lower class white people, to control the slaves. Because there was actually a slave Bible written. I thought, you are joking. I thought, no. That was the best place for me to be when I was there. But me and God are best friends. I don't need to be in this place.
So that resonated. James' stories
yes.
and Freddi's about.
Yes, definitely. Brought up a lot for me.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting, isn't it, how those values of justice are there from those Bible stories and Jesus,
exactly.
but it's about walking the walk, isn't it?
Yes.
And, Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, very much so. I think one of the words that James came up with was, sort of through experience, we learned resilience. And my memory came back to, resilience at school. Moments when I failed because there were things going on in my family life that I wasn't concentrating on my schoolwork. I was letting things slide, and consequently failed exams, went a different route and started to pull my life back together again. But there were those moments where you suddenly thought, it reminded me of the moment when I was sitting in the classroom thinking, I better get my act together because I'm going to have to cope for myself. I'm going to have to become resilient and self-sufficient. And even though I never understood the phrase self-concept until years later when I came across it when I was doing teacher training. And I thought, my God, if I'd known that at the age of 18, 17, 11, that would have been quite important.
So what I'm hearing is that when James and Freddi said you have to take responsibility for yourself, I'm hearing that you realised you had to take responsibility.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, that takes courage. I'm just wondering if the things you learned at school about resilience and courage and responsibility are helping you now as you're getting older.
I think so. The thing which I hadn't spoken of, sort of when I was at school, I was a child carer for my mother who had mental health issues. So I knew the root of mental health. And it was something that was never spoken about. You never mentioned that anybody in your family had mental health issues, or if you were under the weather, or days when I was struggling at college, even when I did find the route I wanted, which I adored, there were obviously off days. I mean, growing up, we all get them, that's life. But then learning how to be able to talk about it, it's only been in the last few years I've been able to talk about it freely and openly.
Wow, thank you, Kate. And do you think it is important for people, and particularly older people, to talk more about this?
It's very important. It's good for the elders and for the young people. And again, I say to all my friends, and when I speak at events, it's really good for elders. Speak to your children, speak to your grandchildren. Make sure they know who they are, because that helps them to have more confidence in themselves.
And how does listening to what you sort of touched on it a bit, how listening to Freddi and James, what have you learned from listening to their stories just now? Do you want to say anything?
James, he said about he'd been doing a book and exploring the mind, and it's 84. I thought that was very interesting. And that it would be lovely to read it and to get more insight as well. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do.
You mean the legacy book?
Yeah, the legacy.
For his funeral.
And how we have to cope in old age, and how it used to be no to ever speak about. That's what you just said.
To speak about mental health. That resonated for you as well.
Yes, it did. And we used to performing Hamlet, and that all helped, with Shakespeare and everything. But when if children fail exams that they're thought of as no good, and they can be put down, and it really affects children.
And I'm also hearing that bullying and attacks and self-esteem from school carries on throughout life, and may circle back when you're older and hit you again and bite you in the bum a bit.
Absolutely, it does.
So when I know there's a lot of talk of trauma these days and childhood trauma, but people think of it just with the current children. They don't realise that maybe older people had trauma. But listening to
they carry the scars, don't they? And they're not healed. This is why it's so good for us to talk even if it's counselling or just talking to a friend, just sharing your stories and bringing things out. Because a lot of elderly people are carrying wounds from childhood. And again, like you were saying, a lot of our people think, oh no, you can't say that, and mental health, no, you can't tell anybody about it.
What's given you the courage to speak about mental health and share the stories and the ways that you are, all three of you are doing?
I think for me, it was my grandma. I lived with my grandma for a short while in Jamaica before I came here. And I remember her always saying, you must always try to be the best that you can be. And that stuck in my head. So when I came here, even though I was put down, you know, you're rubbish, you're this, you're that, I think, no, I'm not. Granny said, I'm better than this. So that made me determined, I'm going to be the best that I can be to make Granny proud of me.
Yeah, our grandmothers have a lot to answer for, don't they? Kate, you're nodding.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I wish I'd known my grandparents, you know, sort of, and, you know, sort of, it's one of those things, but I was recollecting on one of the sessions that we actually had, and again it resonated about communication and telling people, you know, sort of about stories. My father had been through the Second World War and had been one of the Dunkirk people rescued off the beach. And I never really had the chance to really sit down and have a conversation with him. And I've come to the conclusion that part of it must have been that he was suffering stress, you know, it's post-traumatic stress. And the only thing that had broken that conversation was a photograph of me happening to be on the very same boat that years later that rescued him off Dunkirk, and he snatched that photograph and said, "Where did you get this?" You know, and then it came out. He'd never spoken about the war at that point. He did give me his compass, which ironically didn't quite work because he was actually behind enemy lines, which is part of the reason why he'd been rescued, because he hadn't read the compass correctly or he hadn't read the map correctly, you know. So, but I treasure those things, and if I had you know, a box to pass it on, which I will do, you know, that will go in, but it will go in with the story, so that the history is known, because there's so much that's so not known.
So
James, communication is really important.
Sorry to interrupt. So James's idea of that legacy box with objects and stories has resonated a lot.
It is very important.
Yes, definitely.
I guess I was going to ask, what does it encourage you to do as a result of hearing the stories? And I'm already hearing that you might want to go home and make one of those.
Just bring the change about, because Sam Cooke in the 60s sang about the change. Because of what he suffered. And it's like,
it's a long time coming.
Nothing has happened. So it's for us to learn, teach our children, so that we can bring that change about. We can have equality, holistic equality. So,
And I think also it's important about voicing change, you know, and calling out the things, because I'm sick and tired of stereotyped images, you know, or all of a sudden you hit a certain age and, gosh, you're invisible, you know.
You're old now.
Because that's it, and your voice has disappeared, you know, we won't bother talking to you because, and that's why I was saying earlier on that it's a sort of cultural thing, you know, because in more Eastern countries, again, I might well be stereotyping, but within different cultures, older people are respected in different ways.
We were just talking about New Zealand, weren't we?
Yes.
And how the Maori trace their line through their mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers, and how and they talk about elders and how they're valued for that very historical legacy, and I'm sure...
Yeah, it's part of our culture, what we used to be. The young people are on a different level. But yes, you would respect the elders, and if anything was happening, you'd go to the elders, they would talk to you, they would sort it out, and you would say, yes ma'am, no sir.
Yes, yes uncle, yes auntie.
Yes, exactly.
And what about you, Val? You're smiling in recognition of some of those things. What does listening to this encourage you to want to do? Or is there anything else you want to tell us?
Yeah, I saw that sort of attitude when I went to Africa one time.
You went to Africa as well, so that resonated.
It does, yes. And they always called me Sister Val.
Sister Val.
Sister.
It was nice because I never had any brothers or sisters, so I quite like being called Sisters Val.
Oh, when did you go to Africa?
about 20 years ago now. Yeah.
I love listening to you because every time I have a conversation with you, another nugget comes out. So what does being part of this poetry project or listening to James and Freddi and Kate and Deanne, does it encourage you to want to do anything else as well?
Yeah, I think we need to make people realise that they need to be listened to. I mean, by professionals. I think they tend to sometimes disregard the physical problems and think it's mainly mental. All right, there may be mental problems there, but having the physical problems dealt with is definitely a big help.
I think that is such an important point that you've just made, and reminds me about somebody's story in one of the workshops, where she said she was suicidal.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what got you out of being suicidal? And she said, I had my hip operation. So that physical health and mental health that you've just mentioned
It's
is
very close to the physical and the mental.
I did actually think about what suicide. I actually thought about it, and if I hadn't had my 3 children, I didn't want to leave them.
So physical health plays a big part
Yes.
in people's mental health, whatever age, but particularly when we're older. Before I go back and ask James and Freddi, is there anything else that struck you that I haven't asked you that you want to say, that you've got burning to say?
I just think the importance of seeing the bigger picture, not just living in your little space, but trying to understand other people's experiences. And again, not worrying about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow, but focusing on today and just enjoying life. Especially when you reach a certain age, you've worked hard all your life, you just enjoy your life. And then, as I said, embrace the youth and make sure that you're a good example, a good role model for them.
I'm hearing a lot about vitality and walking the walk.
Very much so. I think sort of keeping actively. I mean, again, what was said about phoning up one member of the family for help with a crossword. That is wonderful. Sort of keeping active, keeping engaged, and keeping sort of as much of that engagement, whether it is fell walking or flying or jumping out of a parachute for charity or stuff like that, within safety regulation. But it's grabbing life by the throat and just living it is important.
Brilliant. And do you think these sorts of projects around creativity, poetry, maybe singing, art, help that?
Yes, they do. Art therapy comes in many different forms. And because we're all different, not one size fits everybody. But art therapy is very important for our mental health, and as we said before, the mental health is very closely linked to the physical.
I think what's really important in this process, the flaky pastry bit, is hearing what they said about what you said, particularly, and what captured your attention and how that felt to hear those reflections.
I got loads from that. It was lovely.
I wrote more than you. I've squidged it down to 3 things that really jumped out at me. And one is the link between mental health and physical health. And Val talked about how she was poorly. I was poorly. And that's really, it gives you time. Sometimes you're bedridden, and so it gives you time to think. And you think about, what's going on in your head. I wrote extensively when I was bedridden. When I was off work with depression. When I was off work with depression. Two lots of 6 months off work, just sitting at home, thinking, oh, thank God I don't have to go to work anymore. I wrote.
So journaling.
That's the other thing. Talking about how you feel and writing it down. that's the journaling part, is the path to, in my opinion, wellness. And that's therapy and counselling. And it's something that few people have the opportunity to get at the moment. It's expensive, and there's a long waiting list, and it's awful that people are not being offered it, but are being offered, are being given sedation instead, and stigma.
And stigma.
The huge stigma. My mother was depressed most of my life. I didn't know. I realised that through personal therapy. I realised, I was an abandoned child. Where was my mum? In bed.
In bed, yeah.
Actually in bed.
So that resonates.
And I was farmed out to family and other people. I didn't even realise that was my childhood. And then because of, I now understand how therapy works. Through therapy, I've realised that I compensated for that abandonment as a baby and a young child by doing what I did that totally locked me down into all sorts of different things that I'm now understanding.
My wife was bipolar, and it was 40 years, and it was hell.
Yeah.
I had to take the kids out of the house at times because she was throwing things, or she was just unable to cope with anything, and it was a sort of routine. The ups, when she was up, I took a rest, and when she was very down, I had to step up a bit. And it went on for 40 years.
So was it listening to Kate and Deanne and Val talking about the roots of their parental depression that echoed for you? In that?
It's inevitable that what happens in younger life will reflect into our older life. It's inevitable. Can't do much about it. But those years, when you say stand and watch the big picture, see, just stand in somebody else's shoes to find out how they're feeling. That's a really important exercise.
Was that an image that struck you?
That came me from, I think Deanne mentioned that.
Yeah,
You've
big
got to sort of,
picture.
yes. I remember when the Ukraine war broke out, I cried my eyes out. I came down for breakfast and heard that it all set off, and I thought, this is the first European war since I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it really hit, it really hurt. And I'm thinking, well, blimey, if it's hurting me, look who it's really hurting.
Yeah.
And it just troubles you. It troubles the mind that people are suffering in these ways, in so many places.
But thinking about what Val and Kate and Deanne said in reflection, what other things struck you, or images, reflections do you have about, because the way they listened to you and heard what you'd said, how was that to hear some of that reflected back?
Deanne talked about being bullied at school, and it takes me straight back to being a teacher and trying to deal with the bullying, and yet the experience, what I want to say is, as an experienced teacher, when Thatcher changed everything, she brought in SATs and she brought in the LUCIA. The experience that you'd had of being a long-term teacher with the same age group was a bit like the stigma that one now feels about just being an old person. That it was like, we don't want to hear that. It's not relevant anymore. I'm thinking, how is it not relevant? That I've worked in this area for years, and all these children have passed through my hands. I know what I'm talking about, and I was marginalised the whole time. And in the end, I think I'm repeating myself.
So the bullying is mirrored, not just for the children.
It was never
but for the
addressed.
teachers.
Why were children getting away with being able to bully other children?
Yeah.
Awful.
I was impressed with the idea that we're still active. We're active elders, we're creative, needs to be encouraged, and the mature minds matter. The whole notion of we are not invisible, and we have to make sure we're not invisible, and it's what we do to make sure that everybody is heard.
Here, James.
Opinions are
Absolutely here.
given and listened to. And there are important moves going on to make sure this is happening.
There are.
In the NHS as well, as I found out yesterday. There's all sorts of stuff.
If I lie on my deathbed at 100 years old and say that in my lifetime we fought ageism and mental health,
Yes.
stigmatism of having a mental health condition,
Yes.
I'll be happy.
Oh, great.
Yes,
Amen to that.
yes.
Amen to
I
that.
agree, and I've had 3 bouts of depression in the last 20 years, and before that I never had depression. I was too busy dealing with my wife's depression to think about how I felt, and then suddenly things started happening, and I knew that the circumstances of my life were not changed. Well, they were changed dramatically. So that was the first. That was the first
coming out was
period.
quite a
Yeah,
big change.
that was the first period. The grief, the bereavement, the coming out, and the change of scenery, and all the rest of it. I wrote a poem about that,
Oh, wow.
and
There's definitely a second book here then.
yeah. And the important bit about that was that I don't think I'd ever stood in her shoes.
Your
And
wife's
then-
shoes.
Yes, when she was depressed. And I've begun to understand it more and more, how she was feeling, and she was trying so hard to overcome it without medication. We pathologise mental health issues before necessary.
Yeah.
We should do everything else possible first
Standing.
before we start pathologising. My wife had what was called then endogenous depression.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it means really, except that it was something to do with the internal mechanisms of the brain, which the medication would change, but she refused all her life, refused to take it. And my kids have never forgiven her for refusing.
What I'm hearing from your reflections, both of you and Deanne's and Val's and Kate's, is the importance of standing in somebody else's
Yes.
shoes. It's reminding me of the book with Atticus Finch and
Oh yes,
what's that book called? I can't remember the name of it.
Kill a Mockingbird.
Kill a Mockingbird, which I adore.
Yes.
And where the whole point of that is standing in somebody else's
Yes,
shoes.
yes.
And I'm just wondering, as we're having this conversation, do you think poetry helps people stand in other people's shoes?
Absolutely.
Is that one of its magic
I
potent
think it
powers?
is,
I'm
I
just
think
thinking
it
that
is.
as we're speaking.
Yeah.
Because
But sometimes I read poetry and I don't understand where it's come from.
No.
And I would like somebody perhaps to introduce the poem and said, well, I wrote this in these circumstances. Sometimes I'm missing so much of the poem because I don't know where they were standing.
Yeah.
And I would like to know a bit more about how you get there.
And do you think that other people reading these poems, it will help them to stand in the shoes of older people with mental health challenges?
It must help them. It must help them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Help them see their points
I
of
think
view.
so.
our
I
points
think
of view,
so,
I should
yeah.
say.
There are places where, I mean, there are poetry books, obviously, and people have written poetry forever. But at the moment on social media, there's an actress who is reading her choice of poem, and that is so moving. It's about looking at the world through somebody else's eyes. Because we all look at the world all the time, but when you read the poem and you get another person's view, you think, oh, I hadn't noticed that such and such.
So we've got looking through other eyes, standing in other shoes.
And I've used this with gay people as well. Get the best version of yourself. We've all got different atmospheres that we live in, different places we have to interact with, But for God's sake, be the best version of yourself.
That
And
links
imagine
with,
what
That's
that
what
is.
Diane's
Diane's
grandma
grandma
said.
Yes,
The best you
yes,
can
that's
be.
what they
Yeah,
think of
I
it again.
suffered from having a not a wonderful experience with a grandmother. I only had the one, all the others had passed away before I was aware. And again, it's something that I've come to very recently, why she was the way she was, that grandmother that I had, that was so difficult for me to live with. And the whole family sort of ignored her in later life because she'd been a bully in her early life, and that's why we were such a dysfunctional family. But understanding that is so vital to my own mental well-being now, to understand what my life was like.
understanding the stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just aware of time, and is there just any other thing you want to say about the reflection? It sounds like Dabney's grandmother has certainly resonated for all of us in being the best version of ourselves. Is there anything else that struck you or that you want to comment on?
No.
Diane, sorry.
No.
Diane's.
I'd like to end on mature minds matter.
Yeah, here.
Great.